So I've seen a lot of discussion lately in my community on YouTube about platforming. I have a reasonably large platform, personally. So who do I invite onto that platform? Is it wrong for me to invite certain people on? It seems like a straightforward question, but there's a lot more nuance to it than I thought. So let's take a look at it and see if we can figure it out. One more thing. I'll be at the Faithless Forum conference in Dallas, Texas on April 27th. If you guys want to meet me in person, you can check out the link in the description, faithlessforum.com. Okay, let's get into it. So as some of you may have noticed, this is a collaboration video with Shannon Q. She's a good friend and she's got a growing channel. She talks a lot about psychology and the inner workings of the brain. Really fascinating stuff. She's going to be working with me as we go through this complex subject. You guys should check her channel out. Link is in the description.
Hi, I am Shannon Q, and I will also be at the Faithless Forum on April 27th, and I cannot wait. But before we get started, I'd like to thank TellTale for working through these ideas with me. This isn't an easy topic, and it's wonderful to find a conversation partner that's willing to work through the minutiae of complex ideas.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. Okay, so a discussion arose in my community on YouTube recently about platforming people. Should we be platforming people with harmful opinions? The whole thing was kind of framed from the perspective of platforming extreme white nationalists, or extreme racists. For the sake of argument, let's just talk about whether or not somebody like me, with a reasonably big platform, should lend my platform to somebody like, say, the Westboro Baptist Church. Angry, violent racists, sexist, homophobes. It's very clearly a dangerous cult. Well, here's my issue with the discussion. First, I'm not talking legally. I'm talking philosophically. Obviously, I don't have to bring on anybody I don't want to bring on, and nobody can force me to. It's my right to refuse to allow Scientology on my YouTube channel. So moving forward, I'm going to be looking at it from the philosophical perspective. That being said, what does it mean to platform somebody? What's it mean to platform their ideas? When I hear the term platform, I imagine giving somebody access to a microphone and an audience to talk unrebutted for an hour, like at a college campus or something. Obviously, I wouldn't allow Scientology or the Westboro Baptist Church or Heaven's Gate on my channel to use a bigger audience and say anything they wanted. That would be actively harmful. So do I just not talk about their ideas at all? Do I pretend Jehovah's Witnesses aren't hurting anybody? There's a line in here somewhere, and we have to find it. Jehovah's Witnesses make a big deal about Christmas and how it has pagan roots. How they don't want to take part in that because they don't want to contribute to something that's wrong like that. And during the last Christmas season, I heard lots of atheists saying we shouldn't celebrate Christmas because it's contributing to Christianity every time we do. Are those reasonable positions? Is it reasonable to stop celebrating Christmas because I'm an atheist? Is it reasonable to de facto separate myself from a massive part of society because I want to take a moral stand? Of course it's okay to take a moral stand, but let me ask you this. What about buying snow globes? Is that okay? What if I want to buy a snow globe that has a reindeer in it? Is that supporting Christmas? As an atheist, should I let my daughter take part in Christmas plays? Where is the line? There's a point at which it becomes extremist, and we need to figure out where that line is. As an atheist, is it reasonable to stop talking to friends who refuse to shun Christmas as much as you do? Let's say you have a friend who's friends with somebody who goes all out with Christmas. They're a super Christian, and they make it all about Jesus. They love it. Is it wrong for you to go to their Christmas party? Of course it isn't. Obviously, that's extremist behavior and extremist thinking. There's nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas. Bottom line. There is, however, something wrong with disconnecting from friends over what they believe. That is exactly what Jehovah's Witnesses do. If you feel like your friend isn't being righteous enough with celebrating Christmas, and you decide they're enabling and apologizing for Christianity by celebrating Christian holidays, then you're engaging in extremist behavior. If you have a friend who wants to celebrate Christmas, but you don't think we should be celebrating Christmas, it's extremist, us versus them, black versus white thinking to stop talking to them.
For anybody that doesn't know me well yet, it is going to become rapidly apparent that what is of paramount importance to me is engaging in complex conversations. What may not be immediately apparent and is worth articulating is the reason that I find that so important. In order to ascertain why, first we should have a look at exactly what it is that can contribute to changing a person's mind. Without going too far into the philosophy of mind, first we should look at neurology. Our thoughts and ideas are the products of experiential interpretations that are essentially coded into our neural networks. When we have a perception from the outside world, our interpretation of that perception has the ability of creating or augmenting existing neural pathways in our brain. How those pathways manifest and are utilized in our cognition has a great deal to do with what we already believe, how we interpret those perceptions, and how they fit into our existing neural schemas. To be abundantly clear, changing your mind isn't easy. It takes multiple exposures to a different perspective. Several existing schematics need to be consistently and effectively challenged by external information, and you essentially have to run out of justifications that allow you to uphold that existing framework. That being said, without that exposure, without that challenge, without those new perceptions, that change just isn't possible. We do not arbitrarily decide we are thinking incorrectly. We have to be compelled to. And without exposure, there is nothing with the potential to compel. This is the paramount foundation, grounding my desire to not only conduct difficult conversations regarding controversial issues, it is also the reason that I am passionate about working towards having them in the most effective manner possible.
Now let's bring it back to platforming. Let's say I want to bring a white nationalist on my YouTube channel to debate the merits of his position. Is there anything wrong with that? Remember, I'm talking philosophically, not legally. It's one thing to invite somebody to talk unrebutted for an hour. The influencers among us should be extremely careful who we offer that to. The YouTube equivalent of that would be basically a guest video. But what about a debate-style format? What about inviting the white nationalist on to debate? Some people really benefit from that format. I don't like debating personally because I feel like it's more of a contest to see who can think quicker on their feet, but as long as the arguments are getting pushed back, I don't see anything wrong with it. When I say platforming, I'm not talking about bringing people on to talk about ideas with me. I'm specifically talking about letting them talk unrebutted. I don't really consider it platforming to debunk or debate somebody. I guess it kind of depends on your definitions. That's just how I see it. Here's another example. At one point, I was planning on making a video where I just read the Bible. No filter, no words, no explanations, no nothing. Just read some of the worst verses in the Bible and see if it gets demonetized. Would that be platforming Christianity? I'm not even criticizing. I'm not addressing the claims at all. Is it wrong to do? Am I a Christian apologist if I do that? Where's the line where it turns extremist? Do I need to go through every single verse I read and debunk it, or can I just let it stand on its own and assume my audience is largely on the same page as me with things? And what's more, if a YouTuber did decide to read the Bible unrebutted to see if it got demonetized, would that be reason enough to disconnect from them completely? Obviously, I don't support Jehovah's Witnesses' doctrine. Everybody knows that. But if I decided to read their literature verbatim without criticizing it just to have a record where everybody could go and hear it, would that be promoting their ideas? No, it wouldn't. And if somebody decided to disconnect from me over it, they'd be acting in an extremist way. In the same vein, debating a white nationalist is not tantamount to being an apologist for their ideas. If there's pushback, then it's perfectly reasonable to have them on and talk things through. Richard Dawkins famously said atheists shouldn't be publicly debating Christians anymore because the debate is over. It's been over for a long time. It lends credibility to their position. We can debunk, but we shouldn't be debating. And I understand that position, but I disagree with it.
There is a high degree of complexity when this tack is chosen. Because complex dialogues must be conducted with controversial people, addressing subjects that can be legitimately painful or harmful, the stakes are high. So the question remains, are there circumstances where this shouldn't take place? Are there reasons to not attempt to counter a topic in discussion simply because the person that those ideas inhabit may potentially increase their sphere of influence by virtue of that conversation garnering them more exposure than they deserve? I've spent a great deal of time ruminating with this idea, and I've landed on an answer of no. And I'd like to take the time to elucidate why. Initially, I laid out a minute portion of the neurological and cognitive groundwork surrounding how an individual comes to change their mind regarding their ideas. There are a multitude of studies and theories regarding the mechanisms that coalesce in a change of mind. But there is no inherently clear answer regarding what is consistently and unilaterally effective. What we do know, however, to a degree of absolute certainty is this: there must be exposure to a contradictory viewpoint. Without exposure, the requirement to assimilate and assess information is absent. If that is the case, an individual is free and can continue to consistently reinforce their existing perspective without opposition. If that pattern continues long enough, that reinforcement becomes increasingly difficult to overturn from not simply an ideological perspective, but in fact from a chemical and physical one. When neural pathways are reinforced, they are strengthened by an increase in complementary networks. The further that path is left unchallenged, the more work it takes to overturn it. Now we have to ask ourselves a question regarding human nature. Do we seek out ideas that reinforce and strengthen our existing frameworks? Yeah. Yes, we do. If we are susceptible to the cultivation of dangerous or bad ideas, there is a massive likelihood we will avoid information to the contrary whenever possible. However, there is also a body of evidence that clearly shows that when consistently exposed to information we cannot reasonably refute, we can change.
Back in 2014, Bill Nye famously debated a Christian extremist named Ken Ham at the Creation Museum. I think the proposition was something like, is the creation model viable? I understand that the debate gave the Creation Museum the infusion of attention and money it needed to survive a little bit longer. But how many lives did Bill Nye touch with that debate? How many people did he convince? And how many people were convinced by the Creation Museum's continued existence for the following year or so? Who can possibly tell which side of the debate benefited more from the discussion? I think as long as extremism has a stranglehold over millions of people, over the US and other governments, these discussions need to happen. The more these discussions slow down, in debunk form or in debate form, these extremist beliefs and views become more and more mainstream and acceptable, easier to swallow.
And this leads me back to our ultimate issue. If we seek views that reinforce and avoid views that exhibit the potential to counteract our ideas, what is the best way to encourage people who hold and reinforce dangerous ideas to change? How can we conceivably introduce those who have been compelled by and follow reprehensible and deplorable ideas to contradictory information? If those people avoid external information that contradicts what they already believe and seek out information that reinforces it, and that reinforcing information takes the form of a person who has found a way to be compelling in propagating and reinforcing those ideas, a person they follow and have decided to trust, it stands to reason that addressing that person directly is not just the best, but potentially the only chance that you have to get their attention and elicit some level of dissonance by counteracting their claims. This may not always be the case, but it inarguably is the case. If you find a vile person who has cultivated a following, there is something in their delivery or reasoning that has been deemed compelling. If we stand shoulder to shoulder in a fight for reason, but we refuse to reason against those with influence, we run the risk of speaking to only ourselves. The consequences of that reality cannot go without consideration. The what-ifs abound. What if addressing this person provides them a platform that they can now use to convince somebody else to believe them? What if I do a poor job of my counter and they defeat me? What if I fail and more damage is done? But if we all relinquish the opportunity for fear that we may fail, they exist without opposition. And if we vilify each other for making the attempt, we may discourage someone who shares our goals and could ultimately be the one who is successful from even making the attempt. And then where would we be? There is a clear and inherent responsibility that we all have an obligation to take seriously if we wish to publicly litigate deplorable and reprehensible ideologies. Our arguments must be cogent and our approach must be tactical. As public communicators, what we do matters, perhaps more than we may even realize. But even the best laid plans can fail. And I fear that ultimately those potential failures will prevent even the most competent attempt. Ideas are most harmful when they inhabit people who feel empowered to enact them. They become exponentially more harmful when we allow them to ruminate and continuously be reinforced unanswered.
Now, there's one more argument I feel I need to address regarding debates. There's this claim going around that once you invite somebody like a white nationalist on your YouTube channel to debate, people who watch that video are going to get suggestions for other appearances he's made, and it's going to start people down a rabbit hole of white nationalism on YouTube. That's actually not true. That shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how the artificial intelligence works. It isn't even an algorithm, actually. It's an AI. It's really complex, but to give you a rough idea of how it works, basically, the AI will look at videos that people liked who watched that video and hit the like button. It won't just take a single video into account either. It'll go multiple levels deep. This is an extremely advanced artificial intelligence. If you aren't really a white nationalist, then it probably isn't going to suggest white nationalist videos to you. If you're a football fan, then it's probably going to suggest football videos to you, not basketball videos. So I understand where that fear comes from, but it's really unfounded. Also, why is a debunked video different from a debate video in the eyes of the AI? Both are addressing this person, both are on the same subject. That's what happens when you try to apply intuition to something that's so completely outside of our intuition. People have the same problem with quantum mechanics. Speculation leads to Deepak Chopra level bullshit. We don't know all the variables involved in the AI. In fact, the public barely knows how it works. YouTube barely knows how it works. Speculating with basically no information on it is a bad idea. Now, as I was saying about Bill Nye, he specifically did something contrary to Richard Dawkins' advice. Dawkins specifically said, we should not be debating Christians. The debate is over. And what happened? Bill Nye publicly debated Ken Ham in front of millions and millions of people. Did Dawkins disconnect from Bill Nye as a result? Did he call him a Christian apologist? No, he recognized that it was his choice, and Dawkins has no hold over what others do. Nye felt that he was doing the right thing. Nye and Dawkins agree with each other more than they disagree. They're on the same side. They just have different methods, and different methods are okay. Now, as I said, there's a lot of gray area here. We need to find the line of extremism. Either way, as far as I'm concerned, there's never a good reason to stop talking to somebody completely over the things they believe. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses do. I can't, in good conscience, complain about it when they do it and then turn around and do it myself.
There are good arguments being made that these ideas can be countered effectively without the presence of the person that's perpetuating them. I agree with the sentiment, and ultimately I respect the decision. It isn't one exposure to a contrary view that activates the dissonance required to facilitate a change of mind. It's an accumulation. A style of presentation that works for one may not work for all. The more arrows we stock in our quiver, the better chance we have of hitting our target. Multiple approaches are required if our ultimate goals are the same. Being a detractor who vilifies those who have the bravery and the desire to try simply because their approach doesn't match the one that you have chosen and potentially they weren't effective on their try ignores the more important point. We're on the same team. I know that the stakes are high, and that's not to be trifled with. But cannibalizing those who share your desired outcomes isn't the answer. If you feel that their counter was ineffective and you truly desire minds be changed, offer an answer, offer support, engage with each other, and share ideas that can improve an approach and increase the likelihood of a preferential outcome the next time. There is no one best and only way to attack the bad ideas, but there are so many ways to create factions that act as a deterrent from encouraging one another to even try.
So all that being said, is sunlight the best disinfectant for things? Should we even bother talking about this stuff? When Alex Jones was kicked off of Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and all those other places, what was the end result? Did it hurt him or help him? He had his own website set up where people could go and listen to his stuff, so immediately after getting kicked off of everything, he had a swell of support. But when the dust settled, his voice was quieter than it was before. He had less attention than he did before. He had a smaller platform. What's the end result? Alex Jones had to resort to going to smaller, more extreme platforms that were more accepting of his extremist viewpoints. The audience there was a lot more receptive, so he gets less pushback than he did on YouTube. Without real criticism, the ideas progressively get more and more extreme. So here's the question. Do we just not address extremist ideas like those from Alex Jones, Children of God, the 12 Tribes cult, Heaven's Gate, or the Black Israelites? Is it better to just not address them at all? Let them fade to obscurity? Here's why I think we should be addressing them. They're still affecting millions and millions and millions of people. I understand that leaving them alone is going to help them fade to obscurity, but those ideas are still affecting a massive number of people negatively. And the more we ignore the ideas, the more radicalized the adherents to those ideas become. It's like the difference between Lutheranism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Heaven's Gate. Lutherans have no problem living and functioning in society. They have normal jobs, normal friends, normal lives. Jehovah's Witnesses are halfway between normal society and cult compound. They live in the world, but they aren't a part of it. They don't have regular friends. They segregate themselves from anybody who's a critic of the church. And then you have somebody like Heaven's Gate, which completely isolated their members from society. They lived entirely separately in a compound together. They never saw people from the outside unless they were absolutely forced to. You can see the progression from least extreme to most extreme. Isolating yourself from society will cause you to become more and more radicalized. That's why I think shining a spotlight on groups like Children of God or Heaven's Gate is a good thing. That's why I say sunlight is the best disinfectant. The alt-right is bad. I've seen some very bad extremist right-wing groups do some very bad things. So don't get me wrong. I know you need to be a little more careful debating a white nationalist than debating, say, a mainstream moderate Christian. But I cover groups that are way worse than the alt-right on my channel every day. The alt-right endorses some horrific stuff, but if you want to know what a truly, deeply evil group looks like, watch my video on Children of God, or Black Israelites. They're the black nationalist version of white nationalists.
I am going to continue having difficult and controversial conversations, and I am going to fail from time to time. Those who know me know my goals, and they know that that's what matters. If we are not here to do our best to expose and refute the bad ideas, then what are we doing? I fear that dangerous people who exert powerful influence will exist unopposed in the spheres where they have influence, for fear that we may fail when addressing them, or be vilified for having the audacity to even try. Those networks we create, the ones that have the power to either change or reinforce what we believe, they are malleable, but not without effort. And even more importantly, exposure to ideas that can precipitate that change. The people who have demonstrated the influence required to perpetuate dangerous ideas should not go unrefuted because their ideas are dangerous. They should be refuted because they are. Those of us who do engage all have a responsibility to take care with that task. Some of us won't be, and some of us will fail. But please do not let that convince you to deter another from even making the attempt. You may have just stopped the person who could have made all of the difference. We have to keep trying.
I've built a career on talking about horrific, bad groups. Groups who do really awful stuff. I do it because I was part of a group that does some horrific, awful stuff of their own. And I know there are victims of those groups out there who need to know they aren't alone. I know that sometimes shining a light on them is the only way to de-radicalize them, or at the very least slow down the radicalization. So as I've said before, I will never stop doing this. As long as there's air in my lungs, I will never stop. Okay, that's all I've got for you guys. Check me out on Patreon if you like what I do and you want to support me. Don't forget to subscribe to Shannon Q. She's awesome, she knows what she's talking about, and she's entertaining. Here's a little secret you guys might not know about her. She has a Canadian accent. Now why don't you guys try going back through the video and listening for all the instances where she says "ar" or "about"? As I've said before, YouTube is pretty volatile. It's hard to know if I'm going to make enough to pay rent from month to month. Some months are really, really good. Some months are really, really bad. So if you want to see me keep doing what I do, you can support me there. Also, check out my podcast where I read from extremist literature. Right now, I'm reading a Jehovah's Witness book called Pure Worship of Jehovah. Next, I'm going to be reading some ISIS propaganda. All links are in the description as always. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.
Hi, I am Lula. How'd that go? Oh, I couldn't even say my name. Why don't cats ever understand YouTube videos? Ideas to contradict. I gotta do this again because I fucked everything up all the way through. Wow, how long is this? Oh, okay.